Hello, children. How are you today? I am going to read the next chapter in Toad and Frog's Treasury. I read a couple weeks ago, if you remember, about Frog and Toad. This chapter is called The Story. One day in summer, Frog was not feeling well. Toad said, "Frog, you are looking quite a bit green." "But I always look green," said Frog. "I am a frog." "Today you look very green, even for a frog," said Toad. "Get into my bed and rest." Toad made Frog a cup of hot tea. Frog drank the tea, and then he said, "Tell me a story while I am resting." "All right," said Toad. "Let me think of a story to tell you." Toad thought and thought, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. "I will go out on the front porch and walk up and down," said Toad. "Perhaps that will help me think of a story." Toad walked up and down on the porch for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. He looks a little confused. Then Toad went into the house and stood on his head. "Why are you standing on your head?" said Frog. "I hope that if I stand on my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Look, he's standing on his head. Toad stood on his head for a long time, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad poured a glass of water over his head. "Why are you pouring water over your head?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I pour water over my head, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. Toad poured many glasses of water over his head, but he could not think of a story to tell Frog. Then Toad began to bang his head against the wall. "Why are you banging your head against the wall?" asked Frog. "I hope that if I bang my head against the wall hard enough, it will help me to think of a story," said Toad. "I am feeling much better now, Toad," said Frog. "I do not think I need a story anymore." "Then you get out of my bed and let me get into it," said Toad, "because now I feel terrible." Frog said, "Would you like me to tell you a story, Toad?" "Yes," said Toad, "if you know one." "Once upon a time," said Frog, "there were two good friends, a frog and a toad. The frog was not feeling well. He asked his friend the toad to tell him a story. The toad could not think of a story. He walked up and down on the porch, but he could not think of a story. He stood on his head, but he could not think of a story. He poured water over his head, but he could not think of a story. He banged his head against the wall, but still could not think of a story. Then Toad did not feel so well, and the frog was feeling better. So the toad went to bed, and the frog got up and told him a story. The end. "How is that?" said Frog. But Toad did not answer. He had fallen asleep. The end. Next chapter, we'll learn about the lost button. Have any of you ever lost something and couldn't find it? I always lose something and I can't find it because I'm old. I hope you had a good Thanksgiving, and I can't wait to see you guys again. And don't forget, Santa Claus is coming to town. And he's coming to town in 4 weeks, so be good, for goodness sake.